Hi, my name's Katie and welcome to my channel. Today I've got with me Layla, who is a 2-month-old parrotlet, so a little baby bird, and hopefully she's not too distracting for this video. I'm going to talk about her more at the end of the video for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about her. But for this video today, I want to focus on actually talking about fish and disease and my thoughts on medicating fish and some of the factors that I think are actually most important when it comes to preventing and managing disease in an aquarium. The reason I thought to make this video is because I recently actually treated my fish for gill flukes, and it reminded me of how when I had discus that it just seemed to be a non-stop cycle of having to medicate them and nothing was ever working. And I think that when it comes to medicating fish, it's definitely the exception rather than the rule. It's something that shouldn't really have to happen too often if you actually focus on addressing the core underlying reasons that can cause disease. So I'm going to go through what I think those 3 reasons are in this video today. Hopefully you find it helpful. If you do, don't forget to give it a like, and I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more content like this. Alright, let's get into the video. These lovely little guys that I have behind me are my Lake Malawi cichlids, and I've had this set up for just over a year now. And through that whole time that I've had it set up, I had to medicate them for the first time just the other week because I had some gill flukes that started to get a little bit out of hand. However, in general, when it comes to medicating fish, it's something that I try to avoid doing. The reason is because we don't normally take fish to vets, and so we're just using symptoms that we can observe and then choosing a medication that we think will treat what we believe to be going on. So because of that, at best, it's kind of a guessing game, an informed guessing game, I guess, with Google and through talking to other people. So sometimes we might be treating the wrong thing. But then the other thing too is normally if you do have a disease that becomes prolific in your tank, it's not so much just because of the introduction of it as it is because of actual core underlying issues with the system that have created the environment for that disease to take a hold and to have a really good breeding ground to survive. So I'm going to talk about what those core underlying issues are in this video today. The first thing to consider is actually your water parameters. If your water parameters start to become unhealthy for your fish, so that could be having a breakdown in your cycle that causes an ammonia spike, or it could be that you're not keeping up with maintenance and water changes and there's an excess of organic matter and waste in your tank, then that creates an environment that isn't just stressful for the fish, but it's also a perfect place for bacteria to grow and for disease to be able to proliferate in your aquarium. The other thing too can be if you've got swings in parameters, so if your water temperature is changing rapidly, it's not stable, if your pH is unstable as well, so if you're not making sure that you put buffers in to keep a high pH, for example, with African cichlids, when you do a water change, you're going to need to make sure the water's buffered so you don't have a huge swing in your water, and also that the temperature's matched to the fish tank water. So these are all things to consider when it comes to water parameters. Then the other thing too is making sure that your fish don't get stressed out, because oftentimes fish have a pretty good mucus layer on them, and if their immune system is good, then there can be the presence of things like flukes in the aquarium and other types of disease and bacteria, but the fish is able to be healthy enough to withstand any attack from it. What can happen though is if you've got poor water quality and you've got that breeding ground for bacteria and disease to grow, then you also have fish that are stressed out. When you combine those 2 things together, it's a perfect combination to create an outbreak of some type of disease in your aquarium system. When it comes to making sure that fish aren't stressed out, it's not just the parameters, but it's also considering things like the compatibility of the fish that you've got in the tank too. If you've got fish that are incompatible, you might end up with issues with aggression, and whichever fish is being picked on relentlessly is probably going to have a poor immune system from the stress and be the one that's more susceptible to getting ill. And then other things too, of course, you want to make sure that your parameters are consistent. It is good to see if you can match them as well to what the fish prefers too, to help with stress. So for example, having a high pH of 7.8 to 8.2 with African cichlids, you don't have to do it, but it is something that will just help a little bit. Other things too can be making sure that you're consistent with things, so you've got a routine for when your lights go on and off. A timer or Bluetooth light can help with that, and having a bit of a schedule around feeding. And being aware too that if you have an environment change, so you move house, or if you're changing things in the tank itself and having to get in there with your hands, all these things are things that can cause your fish to be a little bit stressed out and more susceptible to disease. Then the next thing too is actually the type of fish that you've got. Some types of fish are more susceptible to becoming stressed out because they're more sensitive to the parameters of the water, and it can just be their temperament as well. If they're a fish that is more vulnerable to getting picked on in the wild, then it might be a fish too that is going to skits out a little bit easier compared to fish that are more predatory types of fish. So as an example, discus are a fish that people commonly have issues with because just their temperament in general is that they're quite sensitive and shy, so they get stressed out quite easily, but they're also very sensitive to the water parameters. It's just the way that they are. Another example too are some fish like ornamental goldfish. They've been interbred through generations to create certain characteristics that look nice, but they're not actually able to function at their optimal level as a fish because of some of those characteristics, and that can cause them some stress. But also just from a functional perspective too, sometimes things like their swim bladder is going to be more prone to having disease and issues with it because of the way that they've been bred. So when it comes to actually choosing fish for your aquarium, if you want things to be as stress-free as possible and you don't want to have to be battling disease and illness, you want to try and pick fish that are actually hardy species, like African cichlids, for example, are a great fish because they're generally pretty confident, brave fish. They don't get stressed out too easily, and they just seem to be designed well for an aquarium. They're not overly sensitive to water parameters either. Of course, quarantining fish so you don't introduce disease unnecessarily is going to be a good option. But even then, when I quarantine fish, I only do it for about 2 weeks, and the main reason I do it is to reduce stress because they're coming from the fish store into a new environment and the parameters here are going to be different. So if I add the new fish into the main tank too quickly, then the new fish are probably going to be more susceptible to getting stressed out. And then if there's some type of bacteria or disease in my tank that they haven't come across yet, it's going to have an in easily. So it's actually also to protect the new fish as to why I quarantine. And then also, if I do see an outbreak of something while I'm quarantining, I can decide to medicate it if I want. Normally what happens is in an aquarium, you're going to have, minuscule underlying levels of certain things present. It's really hard to avoid getting diseases in your tank, but you just hope that the environment is conducive enough for healthy fish that have good immune systems and are able to fight those diseases off. Just to give you a little bit of an example, I'll talk about the gill flukes in my aquarium and what happened with that. Just in case anyone doesn't know what flukes are too, they're basically little worms with hooks that can grab onto your fish and they eat parts of the fish, so it's really gross. It's not nice at all, but they cause a lot of irritation for the fish. And then with flukes too, you end up with a lot of secondary issues because the fish is even more stressed out because it's irritated all of the time, and it all just ends up getting really nasty. So gill flukes are really annoying. They're kind of like the equivalent of fleas in the aquarium world. About 4 months ago, I would say, I noticed that my bumblebee and Buna wasn't looking too great. I noticed that it was flashing just every now and then, but none of my other fish was showing any signs of irritation or disease. So I just wanted to keep an eye on it. I noticed that my bumblebee and Buna started to get a little bit worse, so started to actually scratch some scales off, and it ended up getting pop-eye too because it scratched its eye and then the bacteria got in there and created that infection. Then what happened was about a month or 2 ago, I needed to catch one of my fish, and in that process I drained a lot of the water out, and it took me a really long time to do it. So the water actually dropped a few degrees because it's winter here, and my fish were really stressed out from me getting in there trying to catch one of the fish, and I knew in my mind that it wasn't going to end well, and I was right. A few weeks later I noticed that more of my fish were starting to now flash as well. It was the stress, I think, that caused it, but then the other thing too is what I believe is the main factor is me not keeping up on maintenance as much as what I should have. My ammonia and my nitrites are fine because my tank is cycled. However, I was having too much of a buildup of waste in my aquarium. I was not cleaning my filters as much as what I should have been. I was only doing it once every 3 months, and I need to do it more than that now. And then I'm also going to make sure that I do 80% water changes every week instead of alternating between the 50 and 80% like what I was before that. It should have been a warning sign to me when my Bumblebee and Boona was getting unwell that maybe my parameters needed to actually be looked at, and I needed to make sure that my nitrates weren't getting too high and that I wasn't having a buildup of organic waste that was going to act as a breeding ground for more of the flukes and disease. I did treat my fish with the Gill Fluke tablets. I use the Blue Planet ones and they are looking better. My Bumblebee and Boona is still recovering, still scratching a little bit, but I'm hoping it's just because it's needing to heal from where the actual flukes were on its body and in its gills. But I know that the biggest improvement is actually going to be through me maintaining my tank better than what I was before. I've made sure that I've cleaned out the filters, I've given the substrate a good siphon as well to remove a lot of the flukes, and I've given the sides of the aquarium a good clean as well. So hopefully we're going to be all good from now. That's it for this video. I hope you found it to be insightful and helpful in some way. If you did, please give it a like. Let me know what your opinion is and what you think in the comments down below as well. And if you're enjoying my content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, for everyone who wants to meet Layla and who hung around for her, I'll show you a little bit about her now as well so you can meet her. She's very, very cute. Alright, so this is little Layla here. She is a 2-month-old parrotlet who I got from my auntie who actually breeds birds. So my auntie's been doing it for most of her life, I think. She's really, really into birds, and she had mentioned to my mum that she got this really lovely little baby, little chick that was very friendly, because just like other animals, all of the birds are going to have their own personality, and Layla was just always very outgoing, she found, and very tame, just naturally. Then when we got talking about it, I had decided that maybe I wouldn't mind having a bird and seeing what it's like, because it's always been something I've thought of, but I just wasn't prepared to have a big bird, like a big parrot, because of the noise and the waste and stuff like that, and the destructive behaviours that they can get up to. However, I didn't even know that parrotlets existed. They're actually related to macaws. They're true parrots. They're just pocket-sized parrots, miniature ones, which is good because it means that it's less food that you have to give them. They've got smaller beaks, so the damage they can do is less destructive with that, and you can keep them in a smaller cage, and they're just, everything about them is easier. Even their poops are really tiny too. They're not a big issue. And she's really, really friendly. She likes to follow me around and be with me, but she's also good at being in her cage when she needs to as well. And I've had her for just under a week now, so 6 days now, and I'm really, really, really happy with her. I think that she's a great little bird, but I'll update you in a few weeks' time and tell you if I still think that, but I don't see why I wouldn't. I think that she's really great. So let me know what you think about Layla, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.